Hello, and welcome to the Disc Dungeon, where we put you on to musics and melodies in the deepest, darkest dungeons of your computer disk. I'm your co-host, Joe Dove, and with me as always,
Julian Valencia. And if there's one thing we love talking about, it's music.
welcome everyone back to the Disc Dungeon. And normally this is your co-host, Joe Dove, but today I'm not co-hosting with Julian Valencia. I am so excited to bring in a podcast mentor, host of the Hive Mind radio show, which can be found on Twitch and many other universes, a gentleman, a scholar, and a hero to the Disc Dungeon, because let me tell you folks, he is the reason we are able to be streamed on Twitch and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and Spotify and all these wondrous things, because he's the guy. He is the man, the legend, who trained Joe Dove on how to do all that. I want to introduce American hero, Stephen James, voice of a god, wrestling legend. So many titles you have, and I'm super excited to have you here.
I feel like Apollo Creed and Rocky 2 at 1 and 3. A lot of nicknames.
Man, I just wanted to shout and give you some appreciation, because we are slowly approaching our 5,000th download.
Wow, congrats, dude.
Thank you. And I wanted to really tip my hat to you. I don't wear one, but
I'll tip my hat towards myself. That's
There
just
you
gonna
go,
hit me in
there
the
you go.
face.
Yeah. And really give you a big thanks for you guiding me on how to like line this stuff up and get it out there.
Absolutely, man. I guide people who have the drive and determination to want to do it, and you're a guy who's always had like a keen, like when you see a direction you want to go, there's very little that's going to dissuade you from doing it. You're just going to attack and attack and attack, and I appreciate that and respect that as well.
Absolutely. Dude, man, I'm super excited to have you here. This is a special SoundCloud. Back to, I know we gave you the big red carpet entry, and now we're getting into the mix of things. But this is a SoundCloud exclusive. We're also going to have this on YouTube. Normally Julie and I do the normal podcast, and we are now in the full range of SoundCloud. So I'm trying to explore a lot of avenues with that. And that being said, I'm trying to venture into avenues with my friends and people that have taught me things, and people that have a real keen mind on music and a real keen ear for the great sounds and yes, the sounds and acoustics that we've enjoyed from our early childhood. So I'm going to paint a really rosy picture really quick. And I'm going to take us back to the 1990s.
All the way back.
All the way back 30 years ago.
Oh my God.
But nobody was alive then.
So old.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to take us back to a time when VH1 used to actually play music and MTV used to play music videos. And in those music videos was the range and domination of the grunge era. Though the videos weren't as clear and crystal as the digital age that we are experiencing today, these videos left such a mark on us, almost like a tattoo of a band that we really liked on our bodies, but in our minds.
Yeah, bands had a visual style all their own.
Yeah. And even in their music, you can hear their style, and it rang deep in our hearts. And the music never leaves us, man. It's just, the time goes on, the sound changes, what they call it may change, but the music is still there. And, rock will never die, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, it's on life support right now.
It really is.
Charts, but it'll never die in our hearts for sure.
It won't die, and it'll like transform. And that's what brought us to grunge. I remember hanging out in a car with my uncle or a couple of my friends, or even back in the day when we had an amphitheater, people used to play hacky sack. I don't know if they do that anymore, but
I could, but I just can't lift my leg that high anymore.
Oh man,
I just take a nap.
Like, tomorrow, kids, we'll do it
tomorrow.
But the visuals were cloudy, the music was dirty, and the bands were even dirtier, and that was the grunge era. It had some of the best tunes that, even if you heard it now on somebody else's car, you'd stop and be like, "That's right," and you'd throw up the horns and you'd rock out a little bit. And in the specifics of this era and this special episode, we're changing up the style a bit, and we're going to focus on those epic grunge years, and we're going to speak of two albums from two bands that we have great affinity for. I know we've talked about this, and we've planning on doing this for quite a while, and I'm stoked to be able to actually have it come to fruition. So I am going to be going into Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots.
Woo!
Oh, the best. The best. Do you remember Nobody Beats the Wiz? I don't know if they
yeah, on 86th Street and Bay Parkway. It's where I bought my first cassette and my first CD.
Wow, that's awesome, man. We had a Nobody Beats the Wiz on Central Avenue in Westchester, where I used to live.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, remember those days?
Yeah.
And my uncle used to have this champagne Thunderbird where he popped out the speakers in the back, and he put one giant speaker and ran cable all the way to the front.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh my God. I swear to God, I'm like, am I going to be deaf when I get older because of this car?
Didn't matter.
Nope. And that music was rocking. And I'll never forget the first time I heard Stone Temple Pilots Core, and it changed my ear for music. I'm a big Sting fan. A lot of people that listen to the podcast will know that I somehow mention Sting every episode. And I've done it today. And in fact,
you got it out of the way.
I got it out of the way early. And if you look closely, right there where my finger is, you can see the folks that are just listening to this on SoundCloud. There's actually the Synchronicity and Sting's first LP on single, on record, on vinyl.
Just casually.
Just cash. But my uncle and I were listening to Stone Temple Pilots. It came on, I believe it was 95.5 when it was actually a rock station. I don't know what the hell it is now. But Wicked Garden was playing.
Oh, wow.
And there's that section, burn, burn, burn.
The chorus,
The chorus,
hits,
the rock, Scott Weiland's voice, the guitars, the drums. It was such a perfect, powerful rock anthem. And my uncle was like, you know what? You want to go come with me and get this on CD? Because this is awesome. And he drove up there. That Thunderbird, like, you tapped the gas and you were getting pulled over because it was so fast.
Wow. Yeah, that album came out, I think, I want to say 92, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere 92, 93.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an older sister.
Oh.
So she was ahead of the curve. You know what I mean? She was older. She had all this stuff. But then she started becoming more into like pop music and stuff like that. The first thing I did was steal that cassette from her because I loved Creep. I loved Plush, all those tunes.
Creep. Oh man, what a song. Then she tells me I'm a creep.
Yeah, she didn't notice that I stole a lot of her music. If you're watching this now for some reason, and I doubt you are,
you never know.
Them's the breaks.
Them's the breaks. Yeah, that song Plush, of course. That 1992 was such a year because, like, there was this big, besides the change of rock, I think Nirvana was making it super huge. And
Nirvana in 91, because all of those.
And it just elevated grunge, like, to the stratosphere. And then we're going to get into the second album that I was going to talk about today, and that's Pearl Jam Versus.
Ooh.
And wow, what a
great album.
Amazing mark on music history did Pearl Jam leave. And they're still around today. Actually, I believe you're even mentioning to me in a few conversations that both bands are still
around. Obviously Scott Weiland has passed, but they, and also their other singer that they had, Chester Bennington of Linkin Park, did a EP with them as well called Out of Time, which was fantastic. I had the chance to see him live with them, and now they have a new singer. I cannot remember his name at the moment, but they're still going strong. Pearl Jam just released an album called Gigaton earlier this year, which is fantastic. So I urge everyone, if you have not gotten onto the Pearl Jam bandwagon, it's still rolling. We're still here.
Awesome. And then later we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to do what we love to do, because I'd hope to have you back on the show in the future. Excellent. I was kind of hoping you would kind of say yes anyway, but you know.
No.
Oh.
Right in the heart.
But we have a custom where we put people onto music, and obviously I think you're going to put me onto this new Pearl Jam album. I'm going to put you on to a modern grunger who happens to be Robert Downey Jr.'s son.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he has his own albums. You know, Robert Downey Jr. sings a lot like Sting for some reason. But anyway,
just gotta shoehorn it in. Just gotta shoehorn it in.
Listen to Sting, but I actually heard his album about a month ago, and it's really good. I was pleasantly surprised. It's got a lot of that nostalgia with the way the arrangement is with the drums and the bass and your standard guitar, electric guitar. And he's got a great voice. So we'll get into that later. I just want to continue to paint the picture for the Versus album, because that song Daughter, man, when I first heard that, I was actually doing the great venture. I used to do this thing called Walk Fatty, and where I would take my fat ass and I would walk from my house all the way to Cross County, which is about 2.5 miles from my house and back. And it's really peaceful. When you know, growing up, I had some folks that were definitely dependent on my mobility, being that I was able to be mobile, unlike they were, and having to go such a far stretch to go to CVS. Like, yeah, we need you to go to CVS. It's like, sure, no problem. I'm going to go to the one all the way over there because there's a Sam Goody right next door.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I did this walkabout, so to speak, I would always hop into Sam Goody, and they happened to be playing this at the time. And the manager of Sam Goody happened to look like, I don't know if you know this guy, Iggy Pop.
Yes.
You know Iggy Pop? He looked just like Iggy Pop.
and scary. It's kind of scary.
And Iggy Pop would always be listening to some type of grunge or some new music that I hadn't heard. And this was a little bit later on, but he actually put me onto that album because he was playing it, and he's like, you guys should definitely be listening to this. And it blew up because Pearl Jam had made it huge earlier.
Yeah.
I think depending on who you are, if you're doing the grunge pyramid, it's Nirvana at the top, probably because Kurt went out the way he did. But Pearl Jam and STP would probably complete the triangle. A lot of rock legends always say that the rock guitar triangle is Jimi Hendrix at the top, Jimmy Page, and Eric Clapton. But of course, you know, you pick your own.
And somewhere Keith Richards is very, very, very pissed off.
Oh, absolutely. He's very good, but he's probably too high to even care.
Yeah. The grunge bands are they call them the Power Five.
Yes.
So it's Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, STP, and Alice in Chains. Those are the ones that usually get the most credit as far as like pushing the commercial success of grunge. And to your point, Versus sold 900,000 copies in its first week.
Woo!
Insane.
No wonder why it was so epic.
Yeah.
It was so good. And
I remember the CD. It's just nice, bright orange. You know,
yeah.
It's like,
and that cover with the lamb on it.
Yeah.
I remember.
I love that album.
That was it's such a great album. I mean, I was listening to again today, reminiscing about how good it was, because Eddie Vedder, he's got such a great voice.
And it just changes. It's changed with the times, for sure. It sounds completely different now than it did before, but the earnestness that's in it and the songwriting and how he takes, because this was before he kind of took control of the band, because the band early on was Stone and Jeff's band from The Ashes of Mother Love Bone, another, you know, Seattle rock band with Andrew Wood dying. You know, everyone kind of knows the story. But then it was kind of sort of becoming a focus on Eddie because he was an attractive lead singer. He had like the story behind him, this mystique. And then, you know, once Vitology came along, that's when Eddie really kind of took hold of the band. So like the first 3 albums are kind of considered, quote unquote, their peak. While I don't agree with that, that was the kind of the trajectory of the band. And you kind of see Eddie more involved in the band, because you got to remember, most of those songs on 10 were written in one trip. He went up there to meet them, and they wrote 7 songs in 10 days and then played a show, which is
I guess
crazy.
things were a lot easier back then because you had to actually do it. There wasn't so much technology involved. It was more of the recording and playing raw to get it.
It wasn't.
I
was going to send you the file, and we
yeah. By the way, can you send me the file? We're not kidding.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how the morphing of music has become. Like I remember, it was such a wondrous story to get to a record store because there weren't that many close by, especially where I lived. I lived like way in the boonies, right next to like the fields and the the swamp. It was like I mean, it's from Mount Vernon, so it's not that swampy, but
swampy enough. There's a little gumbo in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's why there's a Bayou restaurant. But shameless plug. But the days were just wonderful because in order to get anywhere, I would either have to walk for miles or take a long 1.5-hour bus ride because the buses stopped at every station. But I didn't care because I had my Panasonic headphones and I had my Sony Walkman or my Iowa Sound Walkman.
Wow.
Remember those guys?
Yeah, I had a Sony cassette player.
Ooh.
And it had a speaker on it and a microphone. So like if I wanted to like walk around and annoy people with it, I could set it for the speaker, but I could also like dub over tapes, which was pretty cool. But yeah, man, especially as a kid growing up in Brooklyn and having to rely on walking everywhere or public transportation, because if you owned a car, it was more of a burden than anything else. But being
especially
a kid,
in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. Just having your headphones on and just losing yourself in, the music and not necessarily what surrounds you, because while things might be changing now back to kind of the way that it was, man, the neighborhoods in, the mid late 80s and early 90s in New York weren't great. We all kind of looked out for each other if you were from the neighborhood, but they weren't that great. So there was a lot of times where you just put your headphones on, listen to an album and just kind of like look down at the floor and powered through.
That's so true.
Just to get through the day.
It's so true because it was so dangerous back then. I remember once the sun set, my grandmother said, "Boy, you better get your ass back in the house.
The street lights are on. You better get home." Street lights are on.
Yeah. And I remember just jamming out. Some of my favorite songs off of the Versus album were "Daughter," as I said before, "Dissident," and of course, "Elderly Woman Behind the Counter."
Yeah, which is hilarious because that name comes from the fact that the joke was they always had one song titles, one word titles. And
right.
Oh, we got one word titles. So then they came up with that name just kind of as a joke. Yeah. Great songs for me on that album. Rearview Mirror is like basically just essentially like a, hey, fuck you, I'm out of here kind of song. Like I can't deal with, it was a very youthful rage album. Leash was another one.
Oh yeah.
Very protesty.
Yeah.
But then they kind of switched it at the end with Indifference, where it was just like, all right, I'm going to bear everything. Like, just turn off all the lights and just kind of like let them belt it out. And that band was firing on all cylinders there. That's my favorite lineup of the band, with Daybab Raziz behind the kit as well, because they've gone through so many iterations with so many different drummers. But that's my favorite incarnation of the band.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. I mean, mine too. I absolutely love this album. I've listened to it so many times that I actually had to buy it twice. I've only got one other CD that I've burnt out more times than that I had to rebuy, and recently I'm doing that again. Oh, there it is.
One of the first vinyls I bought.
Really?
One of the first vinyls I bought was this.
Now, is that the original, or did you get that like
it's a remade. The originals are so expensive. And
I know.
I actually don't think that Versus was done on vinyl. I think Vitology was the first one, because they made a big point about that. And that's one of the reasons why I really love Pearl Jam, is because they kind of were always ahead of the curve. Even if the curve was 20 years ago, they kind of brought that curve back.
Yeah.
I mean, now we've seen in recent years the boom of vinyl. It's outselling CDs and any other traditional medias, because people want value. They want the experience again. And I think that's why Pearl Jam was so ahead ahead of the curve on that.
You know what else I think about, especially about grunge, is when they did put out a vinyl, and the reason why vinyl was so successful is the sound. The bass is so much richer, and the clarity, you know, unless you have like an old like megaphone,
Yeah.
you know.
What is this? It's like France during World War II. You're just sitting outside listening to music with a baguette.
Exactly. But there was just so much crispness and richness to vinyl that type of music was just recorded better. And what a tragedy that we faced earlier last year and the big fires out west where all the masters were destroyed.
So unfortunate. It's just one of those things that you don't realize how much something that seems so insignificant can really affect things.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, like, how are they replicating these things now? Are they just taking digital and then
that's what it looks like for a lot of them. It's just they're just trying to manufacture the vinyl thing. The vinyl thing is not only is it about the sound, which is a huge part of it, the warmth that you feel listening to it. It's also the catharsis of going through the process of the care that you have for it, taking it out, putting it, you know, on the turntable, like just the care that you have to take, the maintenance that you have to take for it makes you appreciate it more. And, you know, while the MP3 boom and individual songs and thousands of songs really let you hold a lot more music, it didn't necessarily do any favors for listening to albums, because now you can just press next if you're not feeling it. Like when you sit down and you put on an album, you know, it's kind of a pain in the ass to skip songs. So you kind of just let it roll.
Exactly. And that was the beauty of these early grunge albums. Every track was such an experience.
Bangers.
Yeah. That you didn't really want to get up and change anything. You know, I think today in a lot of pop music, you're like, oh, that's one song that I like, but Dula Pia, but everything else is kind of meh, you know? So
yeah, it's mostly singles based. It's actually gone back to the way, like, you know, the Elvis era and, you know, all the Sam Phillips, you know, Memphis Sun Studios kind of stuff is where they would sell the single and then hopefully you would get the album, but the single is what was most important.
Right. And it's just a shame that, you know, besides the loss of all that music, that people don't understand the bliss of listening to it or venturing out to get the music.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember for a little while I had one of those boom boxes that you could record the radio off of. Yeah. And there were some that didn't do it, but my Iowa sound manager managed everything and did it. And for a while I was bootlegging my own. I was that kid from Napster before he was cool, but
with two cassette decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I would do the same thing. Like I had mine had a built-in microphone like my cool. Discman. So I would like dub commercials in between. So like that's how I started in radio. You know what I mean? Like that's how I wanted to do it. So I would like do these commercials and then like, you know, pitch to the next song, and it was always STP or something that, or Pearl Jam. Yeah, this is my favorite genre of music, man. It hit right at the right time for me.
Yeah, I mean, music has such an impact on so many people's lives. Besides fond memories of traveling with my uncle or traveling on my own, listening to these two albums specifically, there was also connections that were made in the music when I had a crush on somebody. And, you know, she told me I was a creep. It's just things like that happen. And it, you know, came naturally. And I still love this song, even despite my inability to champion the woman of the week at that time. But
yeah, my first kiss was actually to Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. I had one earphone in and I was sharing it with a girl sitting on my steps, and she had never heard it before, and we were listening to it, and that was my first kiss. So every time I hear that, you know, album, it kind of like gives me like a cool vibe of that memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, music is connected to all of that stuff, and especially like those kinds of bands where for the grunge kind of came about because the 80s new wave and the quote unquote cock rock era was more like, I don't want to say superficial, but it was kind of superficial.
It was very superficial.
More about excess, more about partying, more about stuff like that. Whereas grunge music came in and it kind of, told deeper stories, showed more warts, was more clever with the things that they were talking about. A lot of it was very political. And growing up as a kid, like hearing Eddie Vedder talk about, you got to rock the vote, or like, talking about pro-choice stuff on Unplugged when he was
Yeah.
scrawling it on his arm. Like for
Right.
me as a kid, if I grew up in the 80s, I wouldn't have been, I should say, if I was, formed, like able to formulate thought as a child in the early 80s, I would have been like, nah, man, like booze and broads, you know what I mean? Like that might have been the kind of person that, we all would have been Dr. Roxo, the rock and roll clown,
Yeah, exactly.
But thankfully, grunge kind of also gave you a, hey, don't just listen to it, like ask questions outside of it, or made you think a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, these anthems got into, I mean, not only the political environment of that time, but they also got into, and it almost looks like I have a point in my head, but that's my my grandfather. Speaking of political, that's my granduncle's flag. He was in World War II.
Nice. Yeah. Mine's hanging up somewhere.
Yeah, and thank you for your service again. I think I pretty much say that every time I see you, but
thank your family as well.
Yeah. And I can't wait to jump into our next section in a minute, but I'm dying to hear about your 2 albums. Just, because I know how deep into the music you are, as I am, into that era, because we lived it. And the other thing about that era is it connected with us because people realized that excess from the 80s was, it was a bubble. It wasn't real.
Yeah.
And when it came crashing down, everybody was in pain.
Yeah. There was a huge vacuum.
Yeah. There was a financial crisis at the time with the bonds. There was also one with municipalities. Homelessness was insane. Actually, Pearl Jam even did a song about missing children. I believe.
Are you thinking Soul Asylum?
Soul Asylum.
Runaway Train. Yeah,
Runaway Train.
With the video. Exactly. That was a great video.
It was such a great video. And I think they found that kid though, which was kind of cool.
Even Flow was kind of about homelessness,
right?
So they were always kind of talking about social issues.
Mm-hmm.
They were always at the forefront. For me,
right.
if the 2 albums that I'm most excited about, the ones that drive me crazy when it comes to Pearl Jam and STP. The first one, we'll start with Pearl Jam. It's a little bit later, but 1999's Yield. Is my favorite Pearl Jam album.
Wow.
It just, the timing of it, I had just moved from Brooklyn, from my friends, to Staten Island, which was a totally different world to me. Everything was so different. It was, I was just starting high school, kind of just disappeared. It didn't have any friends. That album.
It's a complete restart for you.
Yeah, and the start of that song with the start of that album with Brains of Jay, it's just the count off 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and then they just go after it. Do the Evolution, which Todd McFarlane did the animation for that video. Which just was right around the time Bush got elected, Junior.
Right.
And
Dummy Bush, not Smarty Bush.
You're gonna get letters. And it was right around the time where I was kind of formulating who I was. And mind you, this is at that time, I think he was in his mid 30s. Like they were all kind of like in their early 30s or mid 30s, but still somehow they were writing songs that were relatable to me. Longing, finding yourself outside of where you should be, being a stranger, but still.
Oh, wow. What a connection for you. That.
Oh my God. I used to draw little yield signs everywhere because
that album cover. Yeah.
It was comforting to me. Standouts for that. Obviously Brains of Jay, Faithful, Low Light, which I think is probably Pearl Jam's most underrated song. That song just, every time I hear it, especially if I'm outside, it just makes me like, it's just like a deep breath for me. That album is super, super significant. And if anybody hasn't had the chance to check that out. I strongly urge you to. That's considered the most Neil Young version of
Yes.
them, which some people
Yes.
don't like, but for me, that's the album. That's the quintessential Pearl Jam album for me.
Mhm.
For STP, like growing up, I was a rock and roll kid, but
Mhm.
my first cassette was Rick Astley,
Oh.
the Never Gonna Give You Up, Rick Rollin'
Yeah.
guy. Like I love that album. So
Never gonna give, never gonna give.
I know front to back that entire
Wow. Wow,
album.
who knew?
I
Yeah.
warped that tape. I listened to the Monkees. I listened to doo-wop growing up with my grandma. So
Wow.
like a lot of Jackie Wilson, a lot of Smokey Robinson and stuff like that. So I was a bit confused when grunge came around, when a lot of them had the attitude of, well, fuck pop, screw
Yeah.
pop stars. You either liked
Yeah.
one and you couldn't like the other, or you like this and you were posers. Here came STP, who was a very rock and roll, very like Bad Boys type thing, very pop. They were a very
Yeah.
pop band. And then Tiny Music, Songs from the Vatican Gift Shop, their third album,
Oh, wow.
is a masterpiece, a
Oh.
masterclass. It has a very lo-fi, very 60s feel,
Mhm.
very pop, very driving, very
Oh,
fuzzy.
yeah.
Lady Picture Show is on that.
Yes, that's a
Tripping on
great
a
album.
Hole in a Tiny Paper Heart.
Yeah.
And the song that obliterates me every time, where I'm close to being a blubbering little baby, probably my favorite song in the history of music, that isn't Change Gonna Come by Sam Cooke,
Mhm.
it would be Adhesive, which is just on if I remember correctly, on the tape, because remember there's
Mhm.
A sides and B
Yep,
sides
I
before
remember
there were
those days,
CDs.
man.
It was the first one of the B side, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah.
that album for me is the most significant album ever, because it just allowed me to be more, I don't know,
Mhm.
like I
Yeah.
felt like a rock star listening to it. I felt not the skinny, big-eared kid. I felt like a,
Yeah.
a rock star. I wound up, joining bands and, singing in bands because of this album. And yeah, this is the perfect album. Perfect album for me.
Okay, so I just gotta segue a little bit. You used to sing in a band? Like,
Yeah, like,
oh.
teenage bands and stuff like that.
Oh,
Not
okay.
nothing like
I thought you were like,
we've
maybe
got
I
an
opened for
album out.
STP. Dude, this whole time.
Oh, yeah. Don't you know?
Shit.
I opened for STP last week.
That would have been
We're
epic.
about to go out on tour once this
Yeah, just so
whole
you know.
mess
Yeah, no.
stops. I just didn't want to brag.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to give you a couple of minutes to dive into. We have a thing where we dive deep into the music, but we also dive deep into some of the projects we're working on. And I know you and I are very similar when it comes to putting our fingers in different cups, so to speak. And I'd like you to shed light on some of the projects that you're doing. I know I am getting ready to cop a Hive Mind Radio shirt off of your Instagram cart soon. But I'd like you to explain Hive Mind Radio and talk about all the things that you're working on currently.
When I got out of the military in 2013, it was one of those things where I was like, all right, what do I do now? I always wanted to do radio. I always wanted to do talk radio. I always wanted to just talk into a microphone. But when you're a kid, and this is a quote from the Pearl Jam 20 documentary,
Oh.
you don't have to worry about it because it's never going to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like you don't think that you're ever going to be able to do the thing that you dream at a certain point, when everyone's telling you, no, you can't do this, or life kind of pushes you in another direction. Because, I grew up and the first thing out of the womb was, all right, survive. It's very difficult to thrive when all you're doing is surviving.
Correct.
So in 2013 was kind of when I started, a radio show called The Stephen James Experience. And then that morphed over time into something else. And now, about 6 months running, we've launched on Twitch, Hive Mind Radio. And myself and my co-host, Mr. Danny Axel, I've known him, I've known him since the 3rd grade.
Ooh.
It's just like funny, just current events. If you liked Opie and Anthony or Howard Stern or I don't want to say Man Cow because I'm not a big fan of his, but like that sort of radio where, you know, guys are just trying to make sense of the stuff around them in a funny way. Well, we want to be an escape for people who are just tired of being inundated with a lot of stuff, because you have to take a break from everything else and try and
Absolutely.
focus in on yourself and just laugh, take time to laugh. So twitch.tv/HM radio. We go 2 hours every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 11. We also do some games on there from time to time. I'm a big Dead by Daylight fan, so we've been doing that. Also, I am the play-by-play for Catalyst Wrestling, and you can catch us on Fight TV. The times just changed, but go to Catalyst Wrestle on Twitter to find out all the information. I love calling the grapple fights, and it's been super rewarding, and I hope to do more. It's very difficult, obviously, in the current climate, but
Yeah.
you know, once we're able to get live events, there's nothing like feeling the crowd and
Yeah.
calling a
That
match of two
energy is
guys.
just,
Yeah, two
yeah.
guys, two gals, you know, a guy and a gal who, you know, competitors in the ring going at it with each other. And there's no better feeling than to hear the response and then my response to that, to try and pull it out of the viewer at home. So that's really what I've been up to.
I got to tell you, there was
Those are
a
my
time
focuses.
when I was transitioning to New Jersey, and you know, I always behind the scenes with Catalyst in its former iteration, incarnation, yeah. And you know, when I had taken a step back from filming, and you guys started to do these vignettes over at the studio, those were the highlights of my day, man. Like,
Yeah.
with you and Harry and Matt, and when Matt left, it was mainly you, Harry, and Dave.
Yeah.
And I really look forward to that. Huh?
Shout out to Zane Decker, by the way.
Oh
who,
yeah,
is
Zane,
with Ring
man.
of Honor now.
Yeah, top of the world right there.
Yeah.
Good for him. But you know, I really had a blast watching you guys do all that stuff. And Matt always would pop up and be like, "Hey, can you guys help me with the belt?" And then it turned out that you were behind the design of the belt via someone else, and
Yeah.
we were all coming together, collaborating and helping each other grow. And it was a fun time, man. And I can't wait for this pandemic to be over so we can do the same in Catalyst.
It's really hard to do creative things that require, you know, a group, because you're like this, and I know I'm like this, very communal when it comes to like production and you know, ideas and projects, because we're only one person, A, and B, I think I only speak for myself here, but I thrive best when I have someone to bounce off of, when I have somebody to kind of put some of my grand ideas in check or perspective, and be able to do the same thing for other people. Because if it was up to me, I'm attempting to like, I'm gonna do a show on the top of the Empire State Building in my like. Don't you think that's not a good idea?
Yeah, isn't that expensive? I mean,
you don't have the money.
Yeah, just to get in the building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I really enjoy Hive Mind Radio. I didn't pay for the, and I'm gonna correct myself on that and get back on the subscription. I'm just not used to Twitch. I'm still learning about it, and I appreciate you showing me, you know, again, being the teacher, showing me how to like kind of navigate it and being on board. And I really had fun talking about how Zeus fucks gooses.
Yeah. He's totally smashing geese.
He's smashing geese right now on their way down south. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but it's such a great time when you're behind the mic. No matter who you're with, it's always an experience. And I want to tip my hat to you. And it seems like a Gus show for you, but I'm not stroking you too hard, I promise. But
just hard enough to keep me interested. You know?
Yeah, exactly. But I really I'm encouraging our listeners to check out Hive Mind, and especially Catalyst, and all the things that you're getting into, because it's always a treat. And I assure you, you will not be disappointed.
Plus that great episode on Comic Conversation that I did.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is
man.
not the first time you popped
X-Men.
into the to be seen world. Yeah,
love it.
Episode. Yeah,
love it. You guys are doing great things.
Yeah, did you see that he interviewed the writer of Modern Family?
Whoa, seriously? What a get.
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. I have to check that out.
Yeah, and we might have a really big episode coming pretty soon.
Stay tuned. That's a
Stay
tease.
tuned. Yeah, I can't really get into it.
That's what they call a radio tease.
Yeah. But let me tell you, if everything works out, you know, it's going to be one of those map shows. You know, like, holy
awesome.
Smokes, really?
Okay, put my glasses on. Future's so bright, I need shades.
So bright, I gotta wear shades. Oh man, dude, it's so great to have you on the show. I really appreciate the time. I'm so excited to help to do this again when we do this again. And like I said, I just want to like recommend again Stone Temple Pilots, their first album, the song Plush. What a game changer. It made me rethink the way music was played in my Walkman. I always, you know, I stayed in a genre of Peter Gabriel, Sting, Seal, and Enigma. And then
That's a
heard
pretty good lane though.
Yeah, it's a pretty good lane.
I'm not gonna lie.
But when that song came out and I heard my uncle and I heard that on the radio and we ran to Nobody Beats the Wiz to grab that, total game changer. And of course it was on cassette at the time, and then I would buy it on CD, and then I buy it again on vinyl. But I even think the vinyl I had is a bootleg, but nevertheless, it's such an experience. And this music is really, really reflective of what's going on again today, because a lot of the experiences that they sing about are happening to a lot of people today. There's another blight and homelessness. There's a threat of complete chaos if certain things aren't facilitated. So you'll find yourself really connecting to this music now 30 years later. And I want to kind of intertwine it with, ironically, it's a kind of, you know, history repeats itself, but it might not be the same. It's often rhymes. And that happened with Pink Floyd. Like I remember in 94 when I first heard Dark Side of the Moon for the first time, some 30 years after that album had come out. And I feel like the people that are listening to the show, who are mainly here because of the connection with some of the modern music that we also talk about on the show, will get a real treat out of some of these bands from 30 years ago. And they'll learn a lot, and they'll reflect themselves in it, and they'll appreciate it. And that brings me to the final segment, Let Me Put You On. And Let Me Put You On is usually our first segment. That's why I said things are going to change a little bit for this episode. And what we do when we have special guests is we're going to leave them with albums to be put onto. And I kind of mentioned it earlier that I would be putting you on to Robert Downey Jr.'s son, and his current grunge album. And I want to say, like, before you actually like jump in to that, I just want to give you like a little bit of heads up. It's nowhere near the epicness of a Pearl Jam or STP, because one thing I realized when I was talking about these bands is like, man, these guys are so like the pedestal for music, and then comparing anybody else is super hard.
That's why I try not to compare. I try to take them, you know, where they are. I mean, sure, there are times where you see very derivative things, or, you know, when you listen to something like Greta Van Fleet, you're like, oh, okay, it's a Zeppelin cover band, you know. But, you know, when you listen to something like Rival Sons, you hear influence as opposed to direct copying. You know, and I got to thank Mr. Danny Axel for putting me on to just Rival Sons and them.
Awesome.
But wait, so what's the name of this album?
The name of the band is it's actually quite funny that that Robert Downey Jr.'s son's band is called The Dose. Yeah, exactly. yeah, you get it. Yeah. For those folks that don't know, Robert Downey Jr. used to be a very party animal.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that people don't see Robert Downey. They only see Tony Stark. They only see Iron Man. They don't see the guy who was like arrested every, you know, 3 months. He was the OG Charlie Sheen. Exactly.
And The Dose is a throwback grunge band. They call it throwback because, you know, it's that whole nostalgia feel. I don't know if you're familiar with Gunship at all?
Gunship? No.
Yeah. No. So like, remember how we were talking about the glam of the 80s and how everything was like overloaded with positivity, even though it was false?
Even though it was very false.
Yeah. The Gunship has tapped into that sound, that 80s synth wave and reverb drum that Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins and another guy came together and formulated. Do you remember that? Like the Intruder song from Peter Gabriel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
because it's like a
so
reverse.
they're bringing it back.
Yeah, they basically bringing it back, and a lot of those other sounds like that, the synth wave, so to speak. It's all back. There's like 21 different bands.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that are really bringing that back. And now there's the grunge throw. It started out in 2016, and the dose, and that's with Robert Downey Jr.'s son, Ian Downey, the first.
Ian Downey the first, not a junior.
The first of his name. And he's already got a lot on his shoulders, because his father is such a successful actor and who happens to be a very good singer too. I don't know if you've ever heard of his rendition of Driven to Tears.
No, I was still just shocked that Keanu Reeves' band was as good as they were.
Wow.
Dog Star.
Really? I didn't even know he had a band.
Yeah.
Oh,
him,
wow.
Bruce Willis. A lot of actors during the 90s tried to have music careers.
Wow.
And only Garth Brooks tried to go the other way.
And they was like, all right, Garth, go home.
You relax, Chris Gaines. It'll be okay. It'll be all right.
Oh man,
that was a weird time.
It was. Sure. But I'm trying to. It's called The Dose, and they have an EP, and their full album is called Saline, Saline, SALINE. I didn't want to say it or spell it wrong, so I just had to do a quick fact check on myself.
I'm actually typing it in right now, so I can save it for later.
Yeah, The Dose. And then when we have you back, I'd love to talk to you about it, how you felt about it, how do you feel about the arrangements and everything. And I'm telling you, you're going to be in for a treat on his voice, because it was like, oh, who is this?
Kind of like a surprise. Like, where did you come from?
Yeah, this is good. I couldn't believe how good it was. And I hope all of you that are listening do the same. Check out The Dose. And then when you come to SoundCloud, type us in, and then comment and let us know what you think. Well, my friend, this has been an amazing experience, going back to those grunge era days, reminiscing about the good and bad times, but mainly the music that made even the bad times good.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I want to put you on to something.
Excellent.
That's what I want to do.
That's right.
I want to put you on.
Wait. I got to get my pen.
You got to get your pen?
I actually have pens still.
I've got a dry erase marker.
Nice.
And a highlighter. Will that help?
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great things nowadays.
Just not going to use it at all.
Go for it.
But here's a band that was kind of completely missed. Like, those who know, but here's a grunge band, an alt rock band that just went under the radar, but just so powerful. I'm recommending Failure, and the album is Fantastic Planet. It's their third album. It failed to chart on the Billboard 200. It failed to chart, but it's a huge critical success. Everyone cites that as like one of the most underrated albums in the grunge sort of sphere. Songs like Dirty Red Balloons, Stuck on You, Saturday Savior, very, I don't want to say gloomy, but it definitely has that sort of like, driving kind of relaxed vocal. It's a fantastic album. If not for that and Hum, which is another fantastic band, I would not have delved. Like, those were the ones that pulled me past the top 5 grunge bands as a kid and delved in deeper to get to Mudhoney, to get to the Melvins, to get to the Screaming Trees, to get to the Toadies, to get to all of those other bands that were kind of on the periphery, who weren't necessarily being pushed as hard by major labels. So Fantastic Planet by Failure. That's
all right. I've gotten written down, and then we'll come back to this in a future date. We'll set that up.
Hell yeah.
And we'll just dive deep into it, down in the deep dark depths of our computer disks.
In the dungeon, if you will.
In the disc dungeon, as a matter of fact. Yeah. I really hope you're going to enjoy this album. You can do the EP or Celine or both, because the EP is very short. As you know, it's EP. And the full album is Celine. The Drown song is probably my favorite on there. A lot of people like Escape, but there's a lot of great drum and guitar classics that will put you back into the 90s, and you'll say to yourself, wait a minute, wait, this is new?
This is new?
This is new? And you'll really lose it when you see Ian Downing Jr., the first of his name.
He's just rocking a flannel, and he's got
with the long hair and everything like that. You're like, what?
Got these glasses on.
Exactly. Very close to it. And the album cover is pretty cool too. It's like a desert thing with the name of the band written in dirt. So it's very cool imagery, and it kind of just fits in that whole grunge vein.
I'm totally excited to hear it.
Awesome. Well, my friend, I bid you adieu, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to dive down deep with me into the disc dungeon and go over our grunge years, our fun in the sun, walking around and just listening to music that just put a marker on our lives, and a spiritual tattoo in our brains, so to speak.
Awesome. It's been a great time. Thanks for having me. I mean, now thinking about how long it's been, though, I think I need some Metamucil. Where are my slippers?
Oh, man. Here we are. Bro, thank you. And we'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Take it easy, guys.